In this video, we are going to be recapping our knowledge on vaccinations and antibody graphs. We are going to be going through the following 3 learning objectives. Firstly, describing what vaccinations are. Secondly, explaining how vaccinations work in order to protect an individual. And thirdly, explaining the importance of vaccinations using antibody graphs. You will need a pen and paper in front of you, so please pause the video now if you need to go and get these items. We're going to start with the first learning objective, being able to describe what vaccinations are. Vaccinations help give you immunity to a particular disease to make sure that you don't catch it later in life. Vaccines work by injecting the specific disease-causing pathogens directly into your blood. Crucially, these pathogens which are injected are either dead or weakened, meaning they don't pose you a major threat. Instead, these weakened pathogens can be targeted by our body's immune system and destroyed, a process which effectively teaches our body how to fight off the infection if it ever comes back. The person who you can see in the photo on the right is the man who invented vaccinations. He is called Edward Jenner. He found that milkmaids commonly suffered from a disease called cowpox, which was very mild. That means it did not make them very ill. He also noticed that these milkmaids did not die from the smallpox disease which was going around the community. Therefore, Jenner decided it was the cowpox which was giving these women protection. Jenner rubbed some pus from a cowpox pustule into a boy's arm, as you can see on the right-hand side. This boy developed cowpox and quickly recovered, as this disease was quite mild. Later, he rubbed some smallpox into a cut on the boy's arm. The boy remained healthy, as his body had already been exposed to the cowpox pathogen, and so the boy was equipped to fight off the smallpox pathogen, which was very similar, before it could start spreading. This was the first vaccine, and it went on to be so successful that it wiped smallpox off the face of the earth in under 200 years. This is why Edward Jenner is commonly known as the father of vaccinations. We're now going to move on to learning objective 2, which is explaining how vaccines actually work to protect an individual. The first step is that vaccines allow a dead or altered form of the pathogen which causes that specific disease to be introduced into the body. These pathogens contain a specific antigen. Step 2 is that your lymphocytes, which are a type of white blood cell, recognize these antigens on the pathogen and detect that these antigens are foreign. That means they are not occurring naturally in your body. The lymphocytes then produce complementary antibodies, which target the antigen. That means these antibodies are specific to the antigen from the pathogen. Some pathogens that enter your body can also produce toxins, which can make you feel ill. These white blood cells, called lymphocytes, can also produce antitoxins as well as antibodies, and the antitoxins neutralize the toxins. Both the antibodies and antitoxins are highly specific to the antigen on the pathogen. This is why we call them specific. The third step is that the antibodies which have been produced by the lymphocytes attach to those antigens, and they cause the antigens to clump together. This makes it much easier for phagocytes to engulf them. Phagocytes are the second type of white blood cell. They are attracted to the pathogens and bind to them. The membrane of the phagocyte surrounds the pathogens, and the enzymes found in the cell break down the pathogen in order to destroy it. When this white blood cell, the phagocyte, engulfs and digests the pathogen, it is called phagocytosis. As phagocytes do this to all the pathogens that they encounter, they are called non-specific. We are now going to look at our third learning objective, which is explaining the importance of vaccinations using antibody graphs. During primary infection, your antibodies, which are specific to that antigen, slowly increase. The number of these antibodies peak at around 10 days. You can see this on the graph. After 10 days of infection, during the primary infection, your antibodies have increased and peaked. After this, between 10 and 20 days, you can see that the antibody concentration gradually decreases. However, if you are then to be exposed to a second time to the same pathogen, then your white blood cells are able to respond more quickly. This means they can produce lots of the relevant antibodies more quickly in order to prevent infection. You can see this here, that during the second infection, your antibody concentration has rapidly increased to a much higher amount. This is why vaccines are so important. They create the preliminary immune response to a pathogen. Some pathogens require 2 injections to reach sufficient immunity. In this graph, you can see that after the first injection, the antibodies slowly increase. They peak, and then they gradually decrease. However, after the second injection, or vaccination, you can see the rapid increase in antibody production, shown by that sharp increase in the line. After the peak, after the second injection, you can see that the antibody count does start to decrease gradually, but the antibody count remains at a much higher level. The minimum protection against the pathogen has now been reached. If this person was to now be exposed to this pathogen, their immune system would be able to respond very quickly in order to produce lots of the relevant antibodies to prevent the infection. Please now pause the video and answer these 2 questions on your paper. You also now need to complete these last 2 check for understanding questions before we self-assess, so pause the video now to complete these. The answer to question 1 is if you have immunity to a disease, your body can destroy the pathogens before they make you ill. Question 2. What do antibodies do? They attach themselves to pathogen to flag them for destruction. Question 3. Invading pathogens can be identified by their antigens. Remember that your body recognizes these antigens as foreign on the pathogens. Question 4. Unlike pathogens in nature, the pathogens used in vaccines are weakened or altered. We're now moving on to the application task part of the lesson. In this case, the question is the same 3 times. I'm going to go through the model answer with you, and then you need to use the sentence starters without looking at the model answer, using your knowledge to answer the question yourself. The question says, define and explain vaccinations, and evaluate their use in terms of advantages and disadvantages. So there's a lot to talk about here, but it's been broken down into 3 parts. Defining what a vaccination is, explaining how it works, and then evaluating the advantages and disadvantages of vaccines. The model answer would read like this. A vaccination is an injection with a dead or weakened form of the pathogen. Now we're going to explain how it works. Once the vaccine is inside the body, it stimulates the white blood cells to produce antibodies. This makes us immune because some of these antibodies stay in the blood once the pathogen is destroyed. Now we're going to evaluate the use of vaccines in terms of advantages and disadvantages. The advantages of vaccines are they could stop the spread of communicable diseases. Communicable means infectious. They have been tested to check that they are safe. Individuals are less likely to get life-threatening diseases, and vaccines could eradicate disease permanently. However, the disadvantages of vaccines are they can be costly, they may have side effects, and everybody needs to be vaccinated in order to avoid diseases. It is important to vaccinate every child so that diseases can be completely eradicated from the earth. Please now pause the video and answer this we do question using the sentence starters. Here is the model answer to mark your we do against. Please pause this video now to self-assess your answer with green pen and add in any extra information which you might have missed. You're now going to complete the you do task. In order to do this, it is really important that you cover your we do task and try and attempt this question from memory. Once you have finished, you will be able to self-assess your answer against the model. If you need to try and do this again from memory, then re-watch the important information in the video and try and answer this question again. Please pause the video now to complete your you do task. Here is the model answer for you to self-assess your you do task against.